This is an excerpt from Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, from the final chapter titled Henry Jekyll's Full Statement of the Case. Though so profound a double dealer, I was in no sense a hypocrite. Both sides of me were in dead earnest. I was no more myself when I laid aside restraint and plunged in shame than when I labored in the eye of day at the furtherance of knowledge or the relief of sorrow and suffering. And it chanced that the direction of my scientific studies, which led wholly towards the mystic and the transcendental, reacted and shed a strong light on this consciousness of the perennial war among my members. With every day, and from both sides of my intelligence, the moral and the intellectual, I thus drew steadily nearer to that truth by whose partial discovery I have been doomed to such a dreadful shipwreck, that man is not truly one, but truly two. So in terms of my choice for intonation for this passage, I felt like it was really important to do my best to convey the stress and struggle that I think is being expressed in these lines. This is Henry Jekyll speaking for himself and really conveying the way that he has kind of suffered under the kind of oppression of these two sides of himself, and trying to reckon with what is true and what is not, or what is more truly himself and what is not. So by kind of stressing these sort of terms of struggle, like plunged in shame, or this perennial war among my members, I think that is really important to the kind of general tone of this passage. And then in terms of Explication du texte, obviously the narrational aspect of this passage is really important because it's when the reader comes to hear Henry Jekyll in his own words. And from that point of view, I think he's again using this language that's kind of conveying the struggle of the duality that he lives with, or this kind of dichotomous nature of what I think he's ultimately suggesting is somewhat the state of man in general, that there are two sides to every person, and that we all kind of reckon with what that means. Contextually speaking, I thought it was really helpful to read the introductory section for Robert Louis Stevenson, kind of understanding a bit more about his character, and that it fits in a lot of ways into the character of Henry Jekyll, and that he was born into wealth, and that he had these kind of pretty intense societal expectations that he lived with, and also parental expectations. I know his relationship with his father, it sounded like, caused him a lot of suffering. So, and like they say in that introductory passage, he's kind of, throughout his life, Robert Louis Stevenson is struggling with this personal and national identity, and trying to navigate where his allegiances lie, which I think comes through a lot in this passage. And then lexically speaking, I thought it was really important the numerous ways that he conveys this sense of a divergence or dichotomy, again, like the use of the phrase profound double dealer, or hypocrite. He refers to both sides multiple times. Yeah, so you really get this sense of, like he says in that last sentence, the way he has been doomed to such a dreadful shipwreck that man is not truly one, but truly two. And it feels like the language used throughout that passage kind of continually hammers home that point in a really kind of tortured and beautiful way. And then I think in terms of reading this aloud and using Explication de Texte to dissect it a bit more, it was really helpful to truly understand, again, the way that the character of Robert Louis Stevenson is coming through in this story. And even to go beyond that to a more like historical perspective, what we've been reading about in terms of the crisis of faith. I think that experience of, again, like the duality or the dichotomy of being human, of trying to choose between these two things, like a certain moral allegiance to something and then maybe a more, passion-driven side of ourselves, that they often end up being in conflict. And even the sense of empire that we've explored in this section, that could be conveyed in this story as well, that, there's this sort of beneficent side of man, but also the sort of rapacious sense of greed and lust and desire for more that is often present in sort of endeavors of empire. So that's what I got. Thanks for listening.